Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, we'll hear from an ASU professor named by one publication as the most creative person of the year. And we'll hear why the State Game and Fish Commission is opposed to a new federal monument in Arizona. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The U.S. Supreme Court today refused an attempt to reinstate an Arizona law that denies bail to undocumented immigrants charged with certain crimes. The decision leaves in place a lower court ruling that struck down the voter-approved law. And the city of Phoenix today filed suit against the FAA over flight path changes that the city says are causing, quote, extreme discomfort to residents who can't sleep at night or pursue normal daily activities. City also says that the FAA has ignored reasonable solutions to the problem. FAA claims that the new flight paths improve safety. Well, ASU Regents Professor Charles Arntzen has been named the most creative person of 2015 by Fast Company, a magazine that focuses on technology, ethical economics, and leadership. Arntzen was honored for developing a genetically engineered serum to treat the Ebola virus. Here now is apparently the most creative person of 2015. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you.
Well, nice to see you back here again. Good to see you. Thoughts on this award?
Well, it came as a real surprise. I mean, this Fast Company is sort of a techie magazine, a lot of social media sort of things, and it's not a crowd that I usually hang around with. I go to scientific meetings. I mean, I'm not trying to make them sound boring, but it's a bunch of biochemists or geneticists or pharmaceutical development people, and we deal with different things.
Yeah, well, they certainly want to deal with you because you are honored now for developing ZMapp, developing again this genetically engineered treatment vaccine for Ebola. Talk to us about this. What is this all about?
Well, let me just say, what they awarded me for was starting this idea of farming. That's with a PH, meaning pharmaceutical manufacturing using plants like tobacco. And we took that approach back in 2002 with exploratory things, trying to find new strategies for preventing or treating diseases like Ebola. And it took us about 12 years before anyone other than the U.S. military who was funding us, nobody else really paid any attention. And all of a sudden, the Ebola epidemic of 2014 came along. I was delighted because I actually didn't know it was going to be tested in Africa, but collaborators that we work with contacted me and said, watch the news because 2 missionaries have been treated. The 2 missionaries both recovered just from deathbed and were walking out of the hospital within a day or 2 and came back to the U.S. It was a validation of this idea that we'd been pushing for more than a decade, that we can use plants like tobacco to produce a novel new set of therapeutics, in this case antibodies, to treat disease.
Well, let's get into this now. How exactly does this work? What do you do with the tobacco? What are you looking for? How long does it take? Give us the background on what's going on.
Okay, well, in this 10 years we're developing it. The techniques have evolved, but essentially it's a field we call today synthetic biology. In our case, we take viruses that infect plants, and infect tobacco specifically, and we take
Stop right there.
Okay.
Why tobacco specifically?
Well, tobacco is a crop that grows very quickly. It actually has been a very high value in use crop. So genetics of tobacco was done to make sure that the farmers in Connecticut and Kentucky and other places get a crop that is perfect. If you're going to make a cigar wrapper, you want an absolutely perfect leaf. So there's a lot of genetics on the crop. Okay. It grows quickly, and in our case, we're blessed by so many viruses that can infect that plant. We now work with the viruses and take elements out of them, combining their genomes or their genetic information from different viruses, putting it back together, but including genes for something we want, like a vaccine or an antibody.
So you infect the plant with the virus, antibodies show up, you collect the antibodies from the plant, correct? And then do...
Well, so we infect the plant with a synthetic virus. The virus takes over the cells in the leaf, and the plant is in a death spiral because the virus is consuming all the amino acids to make the proteins we want. But before it completes this killing of the plant, we take the leaves off, grind them up, make sort of something that looks like a vegetable shake you'd get in the grocery store, but then use centrifugation and filtration and column chromatography, and from that tobacco juice we purify the proteins that we want. And in the case of Ebola, these are proteins that are injected directly into the bloodstream to bind and destroy the Ebola virus.
Interesting. Now this is farming. This is what they were talking about. This is why you were honored for farming in this particular effort. Can farming be used for other diseases, other conditions?
It can be, and it is being explored. There is a company in Israel that are using plants, in that case carrot cells, to make a drug to treat a genetic disease. There's another group developing a cancer vaccine using tobacco plants. So it's sort of an unlimited array of uses as long as you've got a drug, which is a protein, because we can manufacture these proteins in tobacco.
What got you started in all this?
I was in the Texas Medical Center in Houston nearly 25 years ago. My expertise at that time was genetic engineering of crop plants, improvements that farmers appreciated, like insect resistance. So I knew how to take a gene from a bacterium, for example, and put it in a soybean plant or a corn plant. I was starting a new institute in the Texas Medical Center, and I wanted something I could do that would build upon my skill set. And just at that time, the World Health Organization was calling for new technology for vaccines for the developing world, something that would be less costly, a technology that could be used directly in, say, South Africa or India or any place else. And so I knew that all the new vaccines at that time were coming out as purified proteins. And I just said, let's put this together and take a skill set I had, but make something totally new. Forget about helping the cotton farmer. We're going to try to help children by preventing disease.
And basically, it sounds to me like the tobacco plant is a guinea pig of sorts.
It is sort of a lab rat, or tobacco is really a facile plant for making all sorts of things. And one nice thing is nobody cares about tobacco, so they're not bothered by what we do to it.
No protests outside the building or anything?
I haven't seen anything yet.
As far as what you're working on now, what are you working on now?
My major focus right now is on a vaccine to prevent traveler's disease or stomach diarrhea. It's caused by norovirus, a particular type of virus.
Yes.
We get it epidemic every December through March in the Northern Hemisphere. It sweeps across the U.S. It gets written up in the paper. It doesn't cause very many fatalities, except in the very young and the very old, but it's a terribly inconvenient disease because it puts you out of action for 48 hours. Kids have to get home from school, etc. So there's a market demand for this vaccine. But in order to be useful, it's probably going to have to be an oral vaccine and quite inexpensive. And we think the technology we're developing using tobacco is going to solve both of these problems. We get something that's inexpensive and could be used maybe once every other year.
What's the most time-consuming aspect? I get infecting the plants with the virus. I get the idea of waiting for the antibodies and then collecting the antibody, then going from there. Right. Why can't you do that in an afternoon?
All that is not quite an afternoon, but we can do it in a few months. What is slow then is the testing, because by law, FDA requires that has to be tested in animals first and ultimately be approved to be tested in humans. That's when it gets slow and expensive. So I've been trying to get this vaccine into human clinical trials now for a couple of years, and there's a number of barriers. Biggest one is dollar signs.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, before you go, you were honored for being the most creative person of 2015. Do you ever think about, just sit back and think about the creative process in what you do?
I've said to so many people, my idea of being creative is just working with people that I know are smarter than I am and just listening to them and putting together all these brilliant thoughts. And if anything, I'm sort of a cheerleader that can get people to work together and go in a direction that's useful.
Well, congratulations on this award. You deserve a bunch of others, considering that Ebola. That was quite the vaccine and quite the effort there. Congratulations, and thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
The Arizona Game and Fish Commission opposes the presidential designation of a new national monument in the Grand Canyon watershed. Here to explain is Game and Fish Commissioner Kurt Davis. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
All right. First of all, before we find out the opposition and the reasons for and against everyone's going here, what is the Grand Canyon watershed?
It's a potential designation of 1.7 million acres that basically is north of the Grand Canyon. Some of it comes south, heads east and west. It's a massive proposal.
And the commission now is opposed to that area being a national monument. Why?
Well, there are several primary reasons. One is monuments. We have evidence that monuments actually harm our ability to manage wildlife, and we actually see a reduction in wildlife in certain monuments. Two is there's a degradation of habitat. We know we have forest health problems on the North Rim. We're all aware of those colossal fires that have hit Arizona. You declare monuments, the ability to manage the forest declines, your ability to do that. So there could be a big degradation of habitat. There's also, the fact is our nation can't afford the monument. The Obama administration has released a study that shows our current monuments and parks have $11.5 billion in unmet infrastructure needs. And if you don't add more to that if you're not already paying for what you have.
What would change with the designation of being a national monument?
Well, what the proponents will tell you is nothing. Okay, so then the question is, then why do it if nothing's going to change? The reality is you see over time a reduction in access for recreation, for hunting. You see the inability to manage the habitat for the wildlife. Those are the things that are immediately hammered over time when you have a monument. If nothing would change, nobody would oppose it. But the fact of the matter is it will change, and every monument has changed.
There are some who suggest that the biggest change and the biggest reason for this is to protect the area from future uranium mining. Valid?
There's already the Secretary of Interior has already issued a 25-year moratorium on uranium mining. So that isn't going to change anything. The monument's not going to change that, other than to send the message that mining in and around that area is off the table. We're a nation now that imports 96% of its uranium. If you believe in clean energy, if you believe that we need uranium for national defense, you can't just shut down everything. But this monument isn't going to stop anything that already isn't being stopped by the Secretary's initiative.
And also, the idea of logging old-growth forests, and we've heard about this debate before. There's one thing to thin, but it's another thing to thin old growth or to thin what logging companies don't seem to want. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so we're really talking about a 1970s versus a 2000s debate. The FORFRY, you may have talked about this on the show, there's general agreement about thinning on our forests. The problem is we're not getting from A to B. When you create a monument, you're not going to be doing any thinning. Old growth, new growth, you're not going to be doing any thinning. We will have catastrophic fires on the North Rim. There already have been some serious fires, but there will be catastrophic fires, and that will harm wildlife.
Could it not be argued that the designation of a monument, not a park, and we should say this is very different from a park, although I think some suggest it's the first, the camels.
It's the gateway drug
camels
to national park.
Yeah, okay. But some would suggest that by this designation, BLM and the Forest Service would have a better opportunity to go and thin and not have to worry about all the fussing and fighting.
I would say I'll say a nice word, that's poppycock. The fact of the matter is the Forest Service or the BLM has not been able to let long-term cutting contracts, even in the FORFRY areas, we're talking about 20-year cutting contracts. The lawsuits that follow anytime somebody tries to issue a cutting contract, and in a monument it even becomes more difficult. So if people are really honest about it, they're going to admit that the chances of thinning those forests will be pretty much vaporized.
As far as the ecosystem, the pro side says you got 20 plus sensitive species in the area. They need protection. American Indian cultural sites, those things need protection. This will help protect those things.
Right. So the Antiquities Act, which is what the president uses, and former presidents, not just this president, to declare monuments. It's a power that the Congress gave the presidents years and years ago. That act says the smallest possible area to protect a specific cultural, not 1.7 million acres. That's not the smallest possible, and that's not to protect a single cultural value. So there are many people, many of the advocates that use those rationales because they sound good. But the reality is that's not how it works on the ground.
Supporters say it will improve access for recreation.
It's just not, again, if you go to any monument, you will see a reduction. There are several roads in the Sonoran, for example, Desert Monument, that were closed to be studied. Now they're closed because they don't have the money to potentially open them. That's not an increase in access. On wildlife, on the Sonoran Monument, because game and fish can't get in and work on water catchments and those kinds of things, we've seen a reduction in the sheep population, bighorn sheep, from over 100 to now around 30 in that monument. And that's because of an inability to get in and manage the wildlife. Arizona has the most species in the country other than a coastal state. So the most species of any inland state. We've been managing this area already for its great values.
Well, would not the monument designation, it sounds as though supporters, advocates say not a heck of a lot is going to change. If not a heck of a lot is going to change, if there's a little bit of change, and it's designed to protect all of these things.
Does a little bit of change mean kicking all the ranchers out? Does a little bit of change mean destroying the local economies of the communities in those surrounding areas? Does a little bit of change mean not being able to hunt, fish, recreate? Travel management on the North Kaibab has already greatly reduced the ability for people to camp, for example. There's already management tools that are in place. When they say nothing's going to change, then my question is, then why are you proposing this?
They're saying hunting can and will continue.
It could. Now we've seen again, in monuments and in parks, you can't hunt at all in most parks unless it's been congressionally mandated, because parks don't volunteer to allow hunting. So the fact of the matter is you don't ever see an increase in hunting opportunities. Teddy Roosevelt established this area as a game preserve. It already has a special place in American history as a game preserve, and that's how it's been managed. We have buffalo, we have deer, we have all kinds of wonderful species in that area who have been managed just fine. since our statehood.
Supporters say as well, and you mentioned the local economies, that these, and they've mentioned other areas in the region where the local economy has been stimulated. You say no?
I say no, absolutely. You see a reduction. What happens to local economies in those areas is the people who really feed those local economies have to move on because there's reductions in their ability to spend money in those local economies because they can't make a living there.
There was an Arizona Republic editorial on this. They saw a federal water grab behind all of this. Is that what you see as well?
Absolutely. That also, the little hidden secret that comes with monuments is the federal government then tries to take all the water rights. Senator McCain and Senator Flake, who oppose the monument, have introduced legislation to try to stop any water grab. Water is, you know, Arizona's lifeblood. And maintaining that area so it produces maximum water flow that helps all Arizonans is something that has been going on, and that's how that area has been managed for many decades.
All right. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate
us the time.
And Tuesday on Arizona Horizon, we'll have more on the City of Phoenix lawsuit against the FAA over flight path changes out of Sky Harbor, and we'll talk about the state of corporate giving in Arizona. That's at 5:30 and 10 on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.